The complete works of Swami Vivekananda. Jnana Yoga, Chapter 5, Maya and Freedom, Part 1. Trailing clouds of glory we come, says the poet. Not all of us come as trailing clouds of glory. However, some of us come as trailing black fogs. But there can be no question about that. Every one of us comes into this world to fight, as on a battlefield. We come here weeping to fight our way as well as we can, and to make a path for ourselves through this infinite ocean of life. Forward we go, having long ages behind us, and an immense expanse beyond. So on we go, till death comes and takes us off the field. Victorious or defeated, we do not know. And this is Maya. Hope is dominant in the heart of childhood. The whole world is a golden vision to the open eyes of the child. He thinks his will is supreme. As he moves onward, at every step, nature stands as an adamantine wall, barring his future progress. He may hurl himself against it again and again, striving to break through. The further he goes, the further recedes the ideal, till death comes. And there is release, perhaps. And this is Maya. A man of science rises, he is thirsting after knowledge. No sacrifice is too great, no struggle too hopeless for him. He moves onward, discovering secret after secret of nature, searching out the secrets from her innermost heart. And what for? What is it all for? Why should we give him glory? Why should he acquire fame? Does not nature do infinitely more than any human being can do? And nature is dull, insentient. Why should it be glory to imitate the dull, the insentient? Nature can hurl a thunderbolt of any magnitude to any distance. If a man can do one small part as much, we praise him and laud him to the skies. Why? Why should we praise him for imitating nature, imitating death, imitating the dullness, imitating insentience? The force of gravitation can pull to pieces the biggest mass that ever existed, yet it is insentient. What glory is there in imitating the insentient? Yet we are all struggling after that, and this is Maya. The senses drag the human soul out. Man is seeking for pleasure and for happiness where it can never be found. For countless ages we are taught that this is futile and vain. There is no happiness there. But we cannot learn. It is impossible for us to do so except through our own experiences. We try them and a blow comes. Do we learn then? Not even then. Like moths hurling ourselves against the flame, we are hurling ourselves again and again into sense pleasures, hoping to find satisfaction there. We return again and again with freshened energy. Thus we go on, till crippled and cheated we die, and this is Maya. So with our intellect, in our desire to solve the mysteries of the universe, we cannot stop our questioning. We feel we must know and cannot believe that no knowledge is to be gained. A few steps, and there arises the wall of beginningless and endless time, which cannot be surmounted, and the whole is irrevocably bound in by the walls of cause and effect. We cannot go beyond them, yet we struggle and still have to struggle, and this is Maya. With every breath, with every pulsation of the heart, with every one of our movements, we think we are free. And the very same moment we are shown that we are not. Bound slaves, nature's bound slaves, in body, in mind, in all our thoughts, in our feelings. And this is Maya. There was never a mother who did not think of her child as a born genius, the most extraordinary child that was ever born. She dotes upon her child. Her whole soul is in the child. The child grows up, perhaps become a drunkard, a brute, ill-treats the mother, and the more he ill-treats her, the more her love increases. The world lauds it as the unselfish love of the mother, little dreaming that the mother is a born slave. She cannot help it. She would 1,000 times rather throw off the burden, but she cannot. So she covers it with a mass of flowers which she calls wonderful love. And this is Maya. We are all like this in the world. The legend tells us once how Narad said to Krishna, "Lord, show me Maya." A few days passed away and Krishna asked Narad to make a trip with him towards the desert. And after walking for several miles, Krishna said, "Narad, I am thirsty. Can you fetch me some water?" "I will go at once, sir, and get you water." So Narad went. At a little distance there was a village. He entered the village in search of water and knocked at the door. The door was opened by the most beautiful young girl. At the sight of her, he immediately forgot that his master was waiting for water, perhaps dying for want of it. He forgot everything and began to talk with the girl. All that day he did not return to his master. The next day he was at the house again, talking to the girl. That talk ripened into love. He asked the father for the daughter, and they were married and lived there and had children. His father-in-law died. He inherited his property. 12 years had passed. He lived, as he seemed to think, a very happy life with his wife and children, his fields and his cattle, and so forth. Then came a flood. One night the river rose until it overflowed its banks and flooded the whole village. Houses fell, men and animals were swept away and drowned, and everything was floating in the rush of the stream. Narad had to escape. With one hand he held his wife, and with the other two of his children. Another child was on his shoulders, and he was trying to ford this tremendous flood. After a few steps he found the current was too strong, and the child on his shoulders fell and was borne away. A cry of despair came from Narad. In trying to save that child, he lost his grasp upon one of the others, and it too was lost. At last, his wife, whom he clasped with all his might, was torn away by the current, and he was thrown on the bank, weeping and wailing in bitter lamentation. Behind him came a gentle voice, "My child, where is the water? You went to fetch a pitcher of water and I am waiting for you. You have been gone for quite half an hour." Half an hour, Narad explained. 12 whole years had passed through his mind, and all these scenes had happened in half an hour. And this is Maya. In one form or another, we are all in it. It is the most difficult and intricate state of things to understand. It has to be preached in every country, taught everywhere, but only believed in by a few. Because until we get the experiences ourselves, we cannot believe in it. What does it show? Something very terrible, for it is all futile. Time, the avenger of everything, comes and nothing is left. He swallows up the saint and the sinner, the king and the peasant, the beautiful and the ugly. He leaves nothing. Everything is rushing towards that one goal, destruction. Our knowledge, our arts, our sciences, everything is rushing towards it. Nothing can stem the tide. Nothing can hold it back for a minute. We may try to forget it in the same way that persons in a plague-striker city try to create oblivion by drinking, dancing, and other vain attempts, and so become paralyzed. So we are trying to forget, trying to create oblivion by all sorts of sense pleasures. And this is Maya. Two ways have been proposed. One method, which everyone knows, it is very common, and that is, it may be true, but do not think of it. Make hay while the sun shines, as the proverb says. It is all true, it is a fact, but do not mind it. Seize the few pleasures you can. Do whatever little you can. Do not look at the dark side of the picture, but always towards the hopeful, the positive side. There is some truth in this, but there is also a danger. The truth is, it is a good motive power. Hope and a positive ideal are very good motive powers in our life. But there is a certain danger in them. The danger lies in our giving up the struggle in despair. Such is the case with those who preach, take the world as it is. Sit down and calmly and comfortably as you can and be contented with all these miseries. When you receive blows, say that these are not blows but flowers. And when you are driven about like slaves, say that you are free. Day and night tell lies to others and to your own souls, because that is the only way to live happily. This is what is called practical wisdom. And never was it more prevalent in this world than in this 19th century, because never were harder blows hit than at the present time. Never was competition keener. Never were men so cruel to their fellow men as now. And therefore must this consolation be offered. It is put forward in the strongest way at the present time, but it fails as it always must fail. We cannot hide a carrion with roses. It is impossible. It would not avail long. So, for soon the roses will fade and the carrion would be worse than ever before. So with our lives, we may try to cover our gold and festering sores with gold, but there comes a day when the cloth of gold is removed and the sore in all its ugliness is revealed. Is there then no hope? True, it is that we are all slaves of Maya, born in Maya and live in Maya. Is there then no way out, no hope? That we are all miserable, that this world is really a prison, that even our so-called trailing beauty is but a prison house, and that even in our intellect and minds, our prison houses have been known for ages upon ages. There has never been a man, there has never been a human soul who has not felt this sometime or the other, however he may talk. And the old people feel it most, because in them is the accumulated experience of a whole life. Because they cannot be easily cheated by the lies of nature. Is there no way out? We find that with all this, with this terrible fact before us, in the midst of sorrow and suffering, even in this world where life and death are synonymous, even here, there is still a small voice that is ringing through all the ages, through every country and in every heart. This my Maya is divine, made up of qualities and very difficult to cross. Yet those that come unto me cross the river of life. Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. This is the voice that is leading us forward. Man has heard it and is hearing it all through the ages. This voice comes to men when everything seems to be lost and hope has fled, when man's dependence on his strength has been crushed down and everything seems to melt away between his fingers, and his life is a hopeless ruin. Then he hears it. This is called religion.